Alright, I need to level with you, I'm a little bit worried, and I know I'm not the only one. If you've been riding with the Batman Arkham series since the days of creeping through intensive treatment in 2009, you're probably feeling the same way as me. I'm not usually the sky is falling and everyone's gonna die sort of guy. I hate that whole doom spiral mindset. Hopium has kept this series alive for now, and I don't want to see that end. But after talking with friends, other creators, and people who've been in this community for years, one thing keeps coming up again and again. Arkham feels like it's at a crossroads. This franchise gave us genre-defining combat, some of the best superhero storytelling in gaming, and a version of Batman that in many ways felt definitive. But right now, it feels like the identity of the series is being tested. What does Arkham actually mean going forward? Is it the gameplay formula? Is it the tone, a specific timeline? Or is it just branding at this point? See, that's the uncomfortable part of this whole thing, because once you start asking that question, you realise the answer isn't as obvious as it used to be, and that, as a long-time fan, a lifetime fan even, is genuinely worrying. Let me know what you think the most likely outcome is for the Arkham series down below, and don't forget to drop a like to help the video out, and if you like Arkham and Batman content, hit the subscribe button. We're within touching distance of 20,000 subscribers, and without further ado, let's discuss the future of the Arkham franchise. The big question is, where do we go from here? We can look back at a franchise with some of the greatest, most influential games in its respective genre. Arkham Asylum changed the gaming landscape, City blew everyone's mind, Knight took the world by storm and is still the most played of the series nearly 11 years later, Origins was a great prequel, Shadow brought a VR experience like no other to the VR landscape, but now we sit at a point where the future of the franchise is stuck between a rock and a hard place. I know it gets a lot of stick, and rightfully so, but Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League might be the game at fault for this dilemma. There are other shortcomings, but for me, the main one is the game we try and brush under the carpet. Now, I won't even pretend to have any gameplay for this to show you here. I played it at launch, finished it, and found it absolutely disgraceful, and never touched it again. But what it's done, and what Rocksteady have done by doubling down on it being canon to the Arkhamverse, is forced the series into a place where it can't really go back to Batman by himself with the Bat family. You know why? Because as far as we know, Tim Drake is dead, no one knows what happened to Nightwing, and the rest of them are just sort of scattered to the wind. This means the foundations laid in Night with the Bat family and their eventual rise to becoming this new generation of protectors of Gotham and Bloodhaven have had a narrative sledgehammer taken to them. Those foundations are gone, and now with Batman supposedly hopping across the multiverse, a solo adventure on the grimy streets of Gotham wouldn't be a satisfying next entry. I know Batman pretty frequently goes to save the world and then comes back to fight foes like the Penguin, Two-Face and Joker, but in terms of a video game, we've hit a wall where if we go back to Gotham, Arkham Knight's already iffy story is made almost redundant. The myth of the Batman died that night and he became Bruce Wayne in a mask. And if we look at the progression of the Arkham series, I don't know how we can go bigger than a city-wide takeover and the unmasking of Batman. And not only that, but how can it be satisfying from here? What villains are left for Batman at this point in his career to see as a genuine threat to enough life or himself and the Bat family, again, at this point in the timeline? I think there's a couple, but the point is, I think for the Arkham franchise to continue in its current form, they need to make one big fan favourite change that a lot of us have already made in our heads. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League must be rendered non-canon to the Arkham series. That only applies though if they want to continue making Batman games post-Arkham Knight. If they continue with prequels, as much as it'll sting, Suicide Squad can technically stay canon. But we're not looking back today, we're looking forward. So how do we take the Arkham franchise forward while keeping the lore intact, respecting the player base, and allowing the gameplay to make sense in line with the lore and not run into a serious case of narrative dissonance? For those of you unfamiliar with narrative dissonance, in gameplay terms, it's the contradiction between gameplay and the story being told. For example, if Batman was being portrayed to be a man with a no-kill rule, and that was a major part of this random Batman's character, but then in-game there were takedowns where he threw people off buildings and snapped their necks on the regular, but in the story he refused to kill, that's narrative dissonance. It's a direct contradiction between the story elements and, in our case, the gameplay elements. So here's a few ideas that Rocksteady, WB Montreal, or whoever picks up the cape and cowl next could implement to try and save this beloved franchise, pushing it forward and keeping it around for the next generation. So first of all, and what I'm sure a lot of you will have instantly thought of, is Project Sabbath, the cancelled Damian Wayne Batman game. Project Sabbath was a cancelled video game developed by Warner Bros. Games Montreal, and was intended to be the 5th main entry in the Arkhamverse, and a direct sequel to Arkham Knight. Maybe, we actually don't know if it was canon to the Arkham series, but that doesn't matter. It was set roughly 10 years after the events of Arkham Knight. The project was reportedly inspired by Batman Beyond, and the idea was to move the Arkham timeline into a neo-future Gotham, with an older Bruce Wayne stepping back from the cowl, and a new, younger Batman taking over the role, Damian Wayne. Ultimately, the project was cancelled during early development, reportedly as Warner Bros. Shifted focus towards other DC projects. Warner Bros. Later moved forward with Gotham Knights instead, which, while developed by the same studio, exists obviously in a separate continuity from the Arkhamverse. This version would also have used the Nemesis system from the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor games, which is such a wild swing for a Batman title that I genuinely struggle to picture how it would even function. Randomised crime bosses and procedurally generated grudges, it just kind of sounds a bit weird. That said, it would have definitely been interesting to see them try and pull it off. Beating thugs and have them come back as sort of a Falcone or Maroni regen would be kind of cool to see. But given the organised crime in Gotham, as we see it in Batman Year 1, was all but squashed following Arkham Shadow, it would likely be a little odd to see these type of characters make a resurgence, but hey, I'd be pretty happy to see it. Confused, but a Nemesis system would make me quite happy. On the flip side though, the more that's come out about this project, the less excited I find myself getting about what could have been. I can't fully explain why, but it's just one of those ideas that sounds really good on paper, but the more you actually sit with it and kind of think about it, it just kind of comes across a bit weird. A Batman Beyond inspired Arkham game without Terry McGinnis just feels strange. Like, I know Tim Drake also fills those shoes, but to me, Terry is Batman Beyond. That character is the entire point of that future Gotham. He's from a different era than Bruce, meaning he can interact with the world more and engage in it more than Bruce could. And this isn't a hate campaign against Damian Wayne either. I love Damian, and I think he deserves more time to shine on a stage as big as a future Arkham game. But Beyond is Terry's domain, and I won't hear anything else. So, to wrap this up, do I think something like Project Sabbath would be the thing that swoops in and saves the Arkham franchise? Honestly, probably not. It's an interesting concept, it's ambitious, and it's very different, but different doesn't automatically mean it would be good, especially for a series that built its legacy on a very specific tone and structure, and an understanding of who Batman is. Could it have worked? Probably, maybe. In the right hands with the right team behind it, it had a better than even chance of working. But as a straight up, this is the comeback, I'm not entirely convinced. But I'm curious where you land on this, because I know it's quite divisive. Would you have wanted to see Project Sabbath become a reality? Let me know down below. The next idea is one I'm really interested in, and that is a Dark Knight Returns inspired game in the Arkhamverse. I think an Arkham game set 20 years, let's say, after Knight, with a 60-year-old Batman being forced out of retirement by a crime wave taking over the city, would be really cool, and would give Rocksteady the chance to almost nerf Batman a little bit. One big issue I think the developers of the next game face is the insane power levels the Bat family reach come Arkham Knight. It's canon that all of them can do the Fear multi-takedown, which has them moving faster than they've ever moved. Batman specifically is a complete animal and borders on superhuman, so in my eyes there isn't a single enemy who would come close to posing a threat to them anymore, especially with Tim, Dick and Azrael defending their respective cities. So I think the next logical step forward, provided providing Suicide Squad is rendered non-canon, would be to have Batman go into retirement following the events of Arkham Knight, relying on Azrael and an older, potentially Batsuit-donning Robin as field operative, so to speak, to defend Gotham, while he sits back as the man in the chair. The only issue is, now with Bruce being unmasked and presumed dead, there'd be some conflict there, as he can't step back out into the shadows as Batman without confirming Bruce Wayne is still alive. But equally, I think this would create such a cool dynamic between Bruce trying to figure out where he belongs in the world following his unmasking, and also battling against the idea of becoming Batman one last time to stop the new threats that have arisen in Gotham. Bruce fighting Gotham is standard and him fighting villains is pretty much expected, but Bruce fighting the idea that he might be obsolete, that's really uncomfortable for the character, and I think that's amazing. The thought that the world has moved on and that the symbol did its job for a short time but is needed once again means Bruce has to grapple with the idea that maybe time is just all one flat circle and he can't really ever win. He'd be old and grizzled and a testament to the death of the hope that Gotham once clung on to. And with the right setup, with patience and care, that kind of story could hit really hard. You would lean into the aftermath of the unmasking years later, not the immediate effects, but decades down the line. You could explore what fear means when the man behind Batman is public, and how he reacts to that. You could balance some awesome set-piece fights and moments with some really deep, introspective story moments with Bruce. You could even take parts of the dynamic from Batman Ego, with Batman almost becoming an entity in Bruce's head, telling him he needs to make his mind up. It could really lean into huge amounts of character development we never got in the main series for Bruce, and could also serve as a way to introduce Superman and the other Justice League members into the fray without having them be killed off by fucking Harley Quinn. What is all that about? Anyway, we could even have flashbacks to Bruce following his unmasking, working with the League like we see in Suicide Squad, because although that game creates serious issues with the timeline going forward, Bruce finding a home in the League following his unmasking just kind of feels right. I'm in no way suggesting we do a shot-for-shot adaptation of Frank Miller's work. You couldn't. It literally wouldn't work. But an inspired, tonally dark period piece following a struggling Bruce Wayne dealing with his own mortality, what it means to be Batman, and battling with this new unpredictable enemy which shows the violence Batman will resort to claim his city back in his old age. Hell yes. I would kill for this game. This would have the potential to bring Arkham back to its roots, a dark, faithful love letter to the comics, which paved the way for the Dark Knight. I think this could then give us reasonable room to expect sequels following this game, maybe showing the Bat family as older, more experienced crime fighters, no longer having Batman, but having his mind to help them. And we could have a GTA 5 style character switch mechanic, where you can switch to characters and they'll be doing their own thing. You could combine this with the Spider-Man 2 mechanic, where the heroes will show up and help you out in fight, and Arkham Knight's tag team gameplay, and you'd have a definitive Bat family game, which could serve as a great way to solidify Rocksteady as kings of this genre, spreading their wings and hopefully handling this relatively new cast of characters they were only able to briefly touch on in their original trilogy. There's so much room to grow the series by forcing it deep into the future and focusing on that and the existing Bat family. The only issue would be the lack of Kevin Conroy, but I think there's a way around that. Other artists have done great older Batman voices, and there's a chance for someone else to take the mantle here. We then have three distinct eras of Batman's career. The beginning, the fight against himself and his own anger with Origins, Shadow and Blackgate. The prime years, where he seemingly has it all figured out with Asylum, City and Night, and then the comeback tour, so to speak, where the internal and external fights Bruce has are harder than ever with whatever the future trilogy would be called. The final, probably least interesting, but also somehow the most interesting route they could go down is one which I'm not entirely sure I'd want, but I feel like it needed to be mentioned, and that would be to reboot the franchise. But I have a few issues with it from the outset. The first issue would be, it instantly tarnishes the legacy of the series. You know why they never rebooted The Godfather? because it's The Godfather. You don't reboot the classics. You can try, and mostly you will fail. Total Recall, The Running Man, RoboCop all tried to reboot the franchise and failed miserably. Rebooting the series would not only come across as rendering the old games just kind of inferior, but it would disrespect the work done and the legacy those games have built up. Kevin Conroy, Arlene Sorkin and Mark Hamill's legacy as the Arkhamverse portrayals of their characters can't be topped, and trying to do that would just seem wrong. As much as I adore Roger Craig Smith, Troy Baker and Tara Strong, and think they do an outstanding job as Batman, Joker and Harley respectively, for me, they're the modern day trio for those characters. I just think using them to reboot the established lore would be almost bordering on disrespect, and I don't think this series can handle any more disrespect being thrown on its name. It would come across as a soulless cash grab from whichever studio got tasked with it, and I think it would work. Hell, I'd buy it, play it, and probably love it, but I think sometimes things just need to be allowed to exist as they are. I think the most likely option for the future of the franchise, in all seriousness, is more prequels. With the success of Arkham Shadow and the revisionism around Origins, with people finally seeing it as the gem it always has been, I wouldn't be shocked if we never saw any game which takes place post-Knight. And if that means we can preserve Kevin Conroy's legacy as the experienced Batman without throwing the talent behind the prequel games aside, I think this is probably the best way forward, and I still believe there are many ways to move the prequel stories forward without retreading old ground, and building Batman and Bruce up to be the one we meet in Arkham Asylum. Hell, we still haven't seen Batman and Robin work together for the first time, or seen Batman and Jason Todd work together, and that thought is so exciting. This series still has so much to offer, and as we've seen with WB Montreal and Camouflage, the series can continue without Rocksteady. So, as worried as I and many other people in the community are, and although all hope may seem lost, I think there's still life in the series yet, and as Batman has taught us to do, we just need to keep faith and believe in a better tomorrow. Let me know what you'd like to happen as the Arkham franchise hopefully marches on. As always, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, and goodbye.